In this video, we're going to be breaking with the format of our previous entries in this series. Namely, that unlike before, where I covered autocannons, there is little to talk about in regards to the differences in long-range missile systems, or LRMs, outside of the weight differences between the different sizes. The Humble LRM ranges wildly in capacity, but each missile, regardless of the package in-game, though perhaps not in-universe, is essentially the same. This long-range weapons package is the king of the support weapons, and if I may borrow a phrase from history, seemingly can block out the sun when engaging targets, giving these devils a fearsome reputation indeed. Many mechs which lay in unsalvageable heaps, or ones which are being recovered, will be puckmarked by hundreds of impacts by these little monsters, with just as many finding their way past the exterior of the target and destroying their victims inside. Something which I find important to convey, as with our prior entries again, is that LRM systems are not one missile system. For example, a Zeus series LRM launcher and a Holly series LRM launcher are not the same systems. They are weapons that weigh the same for the purposes of installing them into a mech in Battletech, and they have the same range on the tabletop, but they are different missile systems that are just, quote, the same, unquote, enough to allow them to be covered under one umbrella term. They also function similarly in-universe. The LRM systems in 3025, the era of their introduction, are the primarily available indirect fire weapons in the setting, and the only indirect fire weapons that can be affixed to a battle mech at the time of their introduction. There are no real parallels to the LRM system in another class of weapons, but there is the opposite in the form of the SRM system, but that will be a video for another day. Whether it be a small system like an LRM-5, or the largest of these systems, the LRM-20, the impact these weapons have on the battlefield is impossible to ignore. To start with, to cover their weight and critical spaces, these offensive packages encompass a wide array of tonnage and space inside of a battle mech. As a quick rundown, critical spaces inside of the mech depict how much of a volume inside of each machine that these weapons will fill of its available slots, with each section of mech having a limited number of those slots. If critically hit, one of these locations may be damaged. If damaged, the weapon or system is knocked out or destroyed for the purposes of the battle. With that in mind, this will now describe the Inner Sphere LRM statistics. In its simplest form, the LRM-5, it weighs 2 tons prior to ammunition and takes up 1 critical slot. Next, there is the LRM-10 launcher that takes up 5 tons and 2 critical spaces. Probably the most popular in terms of installed systems in heavier machines, the LRM-15 is 7 tons and takes up 3 spaces. Then finally, there is the mighty LRM-20 package, which weighs 10 tons and takes up 4 spaces. When firing, each LRM has the potential to do as much damage as there are missiles available to launch, meaning that an LRM-5 does a maximum of 5 damage, a 10 does a maximum of 10 damage, and so on and so forth. What makes the LRMs different than our previous entries so far is that they are the first cluster weapon that I've examined. What the cluster weapon means is that they don't necessarily hit with their full payload, and in the case of LRMs, you can see that on the chart on the screen at the moment. They may not hit with every missile. In fact, for an LRM-20 in standard configuration, the average number of missile impacts is 12. LRM damage is deployed in 5 damage sets as well, meaning that should 12 hit, 2 sets of 5 damage will be applied to various hit locations, with the final set of 2 damage being applied in a third roll to another random location. In terms of heat, different launchers create different amounts of heat. LRM-5s generate 2 heat per launch. An LRM-10 generates 4 heat per launch. The LRM-15 generates 5 heat, and the LRM-20 generates 6 heat. This means that per damage, LRM launchers offer a great return on investment for heat, and interestingly enough, the same holds true for their ammunition. 1 ton of ammunition gives a large volume of damage, encompassing 120 missiles, meaning an LRM-5 has 24 turns of fire, an LRM-10 has 12, an LRM-15 has 8, and an LRM-20 has 6. Long-range missile attacks aren't hard striking to one location, like a PPC, AC-10, or AC-20, and bathe their opposition in fire, reducing armor across multiple locations, or hitting sensitive and exposed areas. This is a feature I often talk about in my videos, crit seeking. The idea behind it is to use a volume of impacts across the whole enemy chassis, either finding weakened areas or sensitive locations like the head, and disabling an enemy mech in this way, rather than brutalizing it with pure brute force impacts like from a dozen Gauss rifles, for example. All LRM launchers for the Inner Sphere have the same range regardless of the size of their standard configuration. 7 hexes is their short range, but they have a minimum range of 6 hexes. Each space within the minimum makes it 1 harder for them to hit. Inner Sphere LRMs have this issue, in this case because their missiles struggle to arm in time before impacting the target. This means that LRMs outside of being an exact 7 hexes away will always fire at a modifier, either for being too close or for being in medium or long ranges. Their medium range is 8 to 14 hexes, and their long range is from 15 to 21 hexes. Medium is a +2 modifier to hit, and long is a +4 modifier. An important feature I mentioned earlier, without going too great into detail, is indirect fire. This is a more complex mechanic and deserves its own video, but LRMs are at least tactically diverse enough that through the help of a spotter, they can unleash their payloads at their opposition through friendly targeting computers. This adds a multitude of additional modifiers, but it can be extremely effective, often leading to target kills where their opponent had no ability to physically view their destroyer. Because of this, LRMs are often the ideal weapon for support mechs, even in later eras where they are hindered by the dreaded anti-missile system that will be appearing. The missiles are only improved by additional technologies with time, such as Artemis guidance systems, extended range variants of the launchers, specialist ammunition types, or eventually the addition of streak technology. The LRM weapon system is in many ways, perhaps, the ultimate destroyer of the Succession Wars due to the multitude of ways it can be used, and due to the multiple arrangement of sizes that they come in, allowing them to be installed on vehicles of almost any magnitude. Anyone who has been under the wall of LRM fire in the tabletop game, or experienced it in MechWarrior games firsthand, can attest to the frustration and horror the tide of LRMs can deliver. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There is new content on this channel very frequently, and I appreciate your support. Also, a huge thank you to the YouTube members who support this channel, as these videos are possible because of viewers like you. With that, I will catch everyone in the comments section below.